typing. So I see at least one. Yes, I can hear you all right before I keep going. Veronica, would you advise? Should I go ahead?
Yes, you can go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, cool. Um, Hi, I'm Lucy Runkle. I'm the Assistant Director for Adult Education at City College of San Francisco. I've been working in adult education since the 90s, first as an ESL instructor, and then later working at a number of different community-based organizations, running a variety of different job training programs to help people get into different careers and move up within them. And then I've been with City College of San Francisco for the past 2.5 years. So while I've been working in the field for quite a while, I'm still fairly new to the community college world. I actually got my master's in adult education, which some people didn't know was possible, but I did. And the first thing we learn in adult education training is that we want to find out about our audience before we get started. So I'd like to start out by asking you a couple of quick questions. I know it's hard to make a webinar interactive, but we're going to try. So if you could just quickly hit yes or no on this question of whether or not you already work with community-based organizations in your region. And you should be able to see those results ticking up as people are responding. Looks like a lot of folks are already doing some of this. That's great. Terrific. Wait for just like 2 or 3 more responses, and then we'll move on to our next question. Like those have slowed down. So Veronica, let's go to the next question, please. And another big tenet of adult education is that it's not about what we teach; it's about what you learn. So, in an effort to try to target this conversation as much as possible to what you're hoping to get out of it, if you can just type just a couple of words in the box here about what you're hoping to learn, that would be great. Actually, down at Foothill College today at another adult education training on data, and I've already had 2 or 3 side conversations with some of my colleagues about the joys and challenges of working with our local community-based organizations. They can be wonderful partners, but it's not always easy to partner, as we know. So hoping to learn more about what you want to know. Thanks, everybody. Let's give you like another 2 minutes to throw in your answers to this question. Get into the presentation. Okay, I don't see anybody else typing, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, so the goals I was thinking of are identifying areas for partnership with our community-based organizations, some best practices, um, and reviewing some potential challenges and how to address them. And it sounds like there was also questions about data sharing and about funding, leveraging funding. So I'll try to bring those up as well. But if you have specific questions as I'm talking, you can either type them in the chat box, or I'll also leave time for questions at the end My presentation is not super long. I really did want to leave a lot of time for conversation so that we can make this as interactive as possible. So just a little bit about San Francisco. As everyone knows, in San Francisco, we march to the beat of our own drummer, so we are fairly unique in the adult ed landscape. We're the fourth biggest city in the state. We have a huge immigrant population, not unusual. What is unusual is that we have no adult school. The community college took over that role about 40 years ago. Our unified school district does serve some students who are over 18 and thus qualify as adults, but they serve them in their regular K to 12 and alternative high schools. And so a lot of our work with them has been about finding paths for those students into the college and helping people land in the right place once they make that transition. We are a single community college district region, but the college does have 9 locations across our 7 by 7 mile area. And we have a large non-credit division with about 24,000 enrollments a year, and we're the primary provider of adult education in the city. So we're special. And the next question people generally ask is, well, 24,000 non-credit enrollments, what are those folks taking? Well, the majority of it is English as a second language, not surprising given our high number of immigrant students. But we do have, it looks like some formatting got a little messed up here, but the next one down is at 10% is our transitional studies classes, and that's our high school and GED. So between those two departments, that's really the bulk of our non-credit enrollments. Then next up, library services and library information skills is a lot about tutoring through our Learning Assistance Center. And then the 5.5 is non-credit business, and then you'll see it goes down from there into various different career and technical education departments. Many of our career and technical education departments have both a credit and a non-credit side. So they'll have some folks taking credit classes, some folks taking credit, and actually a surprisingly large number of people moving back and forth between the credit and non-credit. And then in addition to the college being unique and the adult ed situation being unique, we also are unique in that we have a very large nonprofit CBO sector. This data is from 2006. I would guess, just from talking to some colleagues of mine and folks who work in the nonprofit sector, that these numbers will have changed in some ways because as rents have gone up, many organizations have moved to other areas, particularly across the bay to Oakland. However, they're still serving people in the city. So the two numbers that I was paying most attention to here is the human services nonprofit at 1,000 organizations, and a city of 800,000 residents is pretty significant. And then we also have quite a few public and social benefit organizations as well. And those folks and also folks who work in education, that includes both K to 12 on up through post-secondary. So it's a range of people of different organizations, but we have a lot of different organizations that provide training, which you'll see in the next slide, that 62% of the nonprofits in the city provide some kind of class or training. Now, many of these are about everything from how to train your dog to how to learn more about a different culture or art or something. But one other way in which San Francisco is unique is that our Office of Economic and Workforce Development, which is our workforce investment board for the city, does fund, using a combination of both federal and local dollars, more than 60 different organizations around the city to do some form of job training or English as a second language or helping students get their high school diploma. So there's a significant amount of overlap between what we do at the community college and what different CBOs do around the city. And one of the reasons that those organizations have grown up over the years is that there's been some challenges in the past with working with the college. So I emphasize the word past here. This is what we heard when we were doing our initial 3-year plan back in 2015. We did a little user experience research project and asked some of the biggest local CBOs who operate in a similar space, what do you think about partnering with the college? And this is what we heard from them. You're big and confusing. You're slow to respond. It's very bureaucratic. Basically you're hard to work with. And I would say the number one question that we heard is that we don't know who to call, or when we do get a name of somebody to call, we don't always get a call back. And so this feedback, which we hear, but also the city hears, is part of the reason that the city was funding other organizations to do what we frankly consider to be our work of doing ESL and helping people get diplomas and doing career and technical ed. So one of our motivations coming into the adult education planning process and into implementation was how can we partner better with our local community-based organizations so that they are sending us more people, so that their experience with us was better. And so in the long run, that we can get to a place that the CBOs are doing a lot of the recruitment and community-based work, and that we're able to share our resources in such a way that the training comes more over to the college's side. It seemed duplicative to us for the city and state to be, and the feds to be funding other organizations to be doing training when we have so much infrastructure to do that. So we started out by doing a listening session in the spring of 2016 when our plan had been submitted and we were really launching services. And we brought together about 30 of the biggest nonprofit education and training providers or workforce development providers in the city and said, okay, we want to work better with you. Let's just get a good idea of what the landscape is. What is it that we agree on? So what are our shared goals? And then what is it that you guys as CBOs on the right-hand side do really well? And then what is it that we at the college do well, and how can we work more effectively together? So I'm not going to read to you, but you can kind of see the differences there. A lot of the differences in scale. What we hear from a lot of our CBO partners is that they work very intensively with their clients. They often one-on-one, and they also are much more experienced at doing the job search and placement piece. And they can also fund things that we can't necessarily fund, such as exam costs, books, clothes, and transit passes, and all childcare in some cases that the college is not able to do. The college, on the other hand, has, rather than just 1 or 2 training programs that we offer, we have literally thousands of different courses, and we have access to federal and state financial aid, and we have a lot, as I said, more kind of infrastructure that people than the CBOs might have. That they're many times operating on a shoestring budget and really operating on a year-to-year basis, whereas we have been around for 85 years and plan to continue being here for the foreseeable future. So out of that listening session, we asked there, hey, who wants to be involved in taking this to the next level? We recognize that there have been challenges in the past. We really want to do whatever we can to alleviate those challenges and create more effective partnerships. Who's willing to work with us on trying to make that happen? And we identified a group of 6 or 7 of the largest CBOs in the city And we had a series of uh, meetings every other week for the space of 3 or 4 months, um, and really talked through what would a partnership process look like. And through that, we developed a brochure that I have a little screenshot of the cover of it, and then a link to the brochure itself. And in the brochure, we laid out, so, what is it that you're looking for? And here are some ways that we can work together. The primary way that we identified is through instructional service agreements. And the instructional service agreement was meant to be a way in which, with no money changing hands, we would come in and provide training that a organization's clients needed. So we would get the enrollments, and then they get essentially free training that they otherwise would have paid for out of their funds. And that's proven to be a great starting point for working with a number of different organizations. We've done that now with 4 different CBOs around the city, and have gotten really positive feedback from that. And it's been a good pipeline of bringing in new students to the college who might not otherwise have joined us. We also use this CBO advisory group to do some marketing focus groups. So the link that Veronica was going to post, I don't actually see the link, Veronica. Maybe it's posted somewhere that I can't see it. But the link to the ad that we developed was based on input that we got from our marketing focus groups from our CBO partners, and because they are talking to clients every day, we're able to really say, this is what we think will resonate with people, and these are the messages that we think people haven't heard before and need to know. Most significantly, is that people didn't really know that non-credit classes were free, and this was before our Free City College project was launched, so that was a big selling point. And the other selling point that came out was that many people were not aware that on our non-credit application, we do not ask anything about residency or citizenship status. And so that was something that we really tried to emphasize in our marketing going forward. Our CBO advisory committee has continued to meet. We now meet monthly for a conference
You
call.
are the only participant in the conference. Please press any key on your keypad to remain in the conference.
Hey, I just heard a message saying that you are the only participant in the conference. Is that an error?
No, it's not. I'll take care of it now.
Okay.
Just 1 second.
So our C
You can keep going, Lucy.
So our CBO advisory committee has continued to meet monthly via conference call, and then we also, through those discussions, decided that we're going to meet in person at least twice a year. We had the first one of those in August at one of our student-run cafes at our downtown center at Fourth and Mission, which was a lovely event. Students did a fantastic job of making delicious food, and we had a really wonderful conversation with our partners about how we can take things to the next level and really deepen the work that we're doing together. So just a couple of examples of ways that we've worked with our CBO partners and what's been effective. One instructional service agreement that we did was with Homebridge. They are a nonprofit home care provider agency. They are frantically recruiting home care workers. It's very hard for them to keep folks employed just because it's a high turnover job with a lot of demand. And so they have started hiring folks who are fairly monolingual in either Spanish or Chinese, and then they need them to be able to communicate with the folks they're taking care of. And so they reached out to us about doing an ESL class. And so we were able to find an ESL class that we already had on the books as a course outline of record, and recruit a teacher who was willing to go to their site and put a class together for them. And so that took place, that was 2 years, fall 2018. So that was fall 2017. And the class went very well. We had excellent response from the students. And then the agreement we made with Homebridge was that this is a one semester deal with this group. And then we're going to use the class as a way to route people into classes at the college that fit their schedules and their level. As I'm sure anyone of you who are familiar with ESL knows that anytime you do a sort of general outreach to a group of people, you'll end up with people at very different levels, and so that makes it challenging to have everybody in one class. But it was a great way to orient everyone to the specific language that they needed to do their job for Homebridge, and then for those who wanted to continue and learn more, they came to college. Another project that we worked on with a CBO partner that we're very proud of was with the San Francisco Day Labor Program, La Colectiva. This actually used to be two separate organizations and then joined. I got a note that my audio is breaking up a bit. Was there anything that wasn't clear in what I said before? If you folks want to just type in the chat pod if there was something that I should restate. I'll keep going. So with the day labor program, primarily works with male day laborers. La Colectiva is actually La Colectiva de Mujeres, works with female domestic workers. They came together 3 or 4 years ago to form one organization, and they got a grant from the National Council of Workforce Education to work with their local community colleges. So they reached out to us, and we have been working with them for the past year and a half on developing ways that we can create pathways, training pathways for their workers, both in ESL and in career and technical education. But in the meantime, it became clear that there was a need for students to know how to respond if there were ICE raids in their communities. And so we worked with the group and with our ESL department to develop a series of workshops and lessons that students could use, that instructors could use to work with students and help them practice the language they would need if they were stopped at work or on the street or in their car, or if folks came to their house. So what exactly were the English phrases that they would need to be comfortable using in order to respond confidently? And also everything we covered had been reviewed by legal counsel, so that we were sure that what we were telling people was exactly the correct words and phrases and terminology. So those materials are actually widely available and have been spread all over the country, and they're linked to in this presentation when you download it. And we are still meeting regularly with the day labor program and talking with them about how we can move that work forward as well. So in general, what has worked is one that we identified early on that rather than having, the college has 2,000 employees, right? And so it's very difficult for CBOs to know who to call. And we said, okay, the adult education office, which is essentially me and my boss, are going to be the first point of contact for any new CBOs that haven't worked with the college in the past and want to do so in the future. We have joked around that there is probably a conversation happening with someone from a CBO and someone from the college on a daily or maybe even hourly basis. And this was our attempt to try to bring those a little bit into a more coordinated way so that we could be the one place who knew if somebody says, hey, in what ways is Goodwill working with the college, we could say, oh, I know that they're working with this department on this and with that department on that, and that we're talking to them about this other thing. So that it's an easier way of communicating. The other thing that came up early on is that we didn't really understand each other's way of how we were funded and what our priorities were. So the college is funded by apportionment, so our number 1, 2, and 3 priorities are enrollments. So anything that we can do to drive up our enrollments, because the college has gone through some challenging times over the past few years. Our enrollments are down 40% from 2008. So we're really focused on anything we can do to help those numbers go in a different direction, right? Whereas many of our community partners are funded based on their job placements. And so they're really focused on how can I get people trained quickly and get into a job so that I can get paid based on their job placement. And just really being frank about those demands, and being able to communicate about them clearly did make a difference in our ability to work together. The other thing that we learned through this experience is that our community-based organizations need to be much more responsive to the immediate needs of their communities than the college might be. We operate very much, we said, in different time zones. That the college tends to operate a little slowly and have to go through a number of different layers, whereas the organizations might get a call today saying, hey, we need to do something about this big civic issue tomorrow, and can you pull everybody together? And that's something that they're really good at and they can do, and that it's challenging for us to operate in the same time frame. So clear, frank communication, that's basically the building block of any good relationship, but building those relationships so that we can be frank with one another was important, and also just knowing that we had common values and that we had shared outcomes. And just a logistical thing, I think everybody knows how hard scheduling meetings can be. What we found is that once we got a meeting on the calendar and we just said, okay, we're meeting once a month and it's always at this day, at this time, and it's on your calendar already, that just made everything so much easier. So I'm a big fan of the recurring scheduled meeting. And then some challenges. Staffing. Staffing is a big one. We have found that, somebody might have a terrific idea for a new partnership or a new program, but it might take, 5, 6, 10, 12 meetings over the course of a number of months to get it going and to figure out who are the right people that need to be in the room. And while it is really great to have the adult ed office as the sort of single point of initial contact, we have struggled sometimes about knowing who we can hand something off to at the college, who has the bandwidth to do it. So even though something might be a terrific idea, it needs somebody in generally a specific department or in a specific division to actually take it all the way through to fruition. And a lot of the folks who are interested in doing new and innovative things tend to be working at 80 hours a week and be hard to wrangle into meetings. I don't have a perfect answer to that one. I guess what I've seen some other organizations do is have someone whose job it is to sort of shepherd emerging projects along until it's clear whether or not they're going to happen, what the funding's going to look like, and who's going to be in charge, and they're sort of the special projects person. We have been operating in that role, but it does get challenging as there's more and more and more possibilities. And then as I referenced a little bit earlier, we have definite differences in the pace of activity and the layers of decision making. I fondly remember working at a small CBO where if somebody said, "Hey, do you want to do this training program?" I'd be like, "Great, let's start next week." And let me just walk down the hall and get the funding in line for that, and make a couple calls and figure out who's going to staff it. And that's easy at a small organization and very hard at a large one to figure out who all needs to approve this and where does that authority lay, and how can we kind of move things a little faster given the challenges we have with curriculum and staffing. And then leveraging funding and braiding funding, these are all wonderful things to do, and I think everyone agrees that it's a great idea. It can be challenging if you have a program that's being funded from different funding sources that have different reporting requirements, different timelines, and different desired outcomes. And so I think those are conversations that definitely need to happen up front. And it's part of the clear communication is, how will we know if this project is going to be successful? What is it that you're hoping to get out of it? How will you define success? And how will we define this success? And making sure that there's a significant amount of common ground there. It can certainly work that where people have different goals in a project, but if they're too different, then it certainly it pulls people apart, and it pulls the project apart as well. Just a quick sort of example there is we have done projects in the past with CBOs where their goal was a job placement, and that's what they're being measured on and funded based on. Our goal is enrollments and building up a class. What seems to happen a lot in this economy is that we're a quarter or a third or halfway through the program, and employers are knocking down our door to try and hire folks, and so then folks are getting hired and leaving the program. The CBO's like, "That's terrific, we got great placement rates," and we're like, "Yeah, that's not going to help us to have people leaving the classroom." Obviously, we all want what's best for the student, but we've certainly had some disagreements about what's best for the student in that situation. I'm like, "I think this student needs a certificate," and they're like, "Well, the student needs a job," and the fact is the student probably needs both, or different students might have different opinions about that question. So it can be tricky to balance those things. Some new projects that we're developing with our CBO advisory group. So I'm going to go a little bit big scale. We had talked in the past about doing some kind of direct funding of our CBO partners, having a request for proposals and having people solicit some of our adult education dollars. And when we sat down and thought through what was that really going to look like, and how would we implement that, it really started to look like that was going to actually hinder our relationship building and make it more political and more fraught than going a different route. Because one, it would be competitive. Some people would get funded, some people wouldn't. Even for those who would get funded, we would need to do due diligence to make sure they were doing what they had said they were going to do and doing it well. And it just seemed like that was opening a huge can of worms and was going to be a big logistical lift that would probably not be worth the effort for us to implement. So we said, well, what are some other ways that we can get some of these adult education funds out into our community and have our community-based organization partners see a concrete benefit from the dollars other than instructional service agreements. And one thing that we heard loud and clear is that these organizations, as we said, are operating on a shoestring. One of the things that they often do not have the resources to provide is professional development for their staff. And we said, well, it turns out that we actually offer a lot of different training programs, including on many of the topics that you are probably paying third-party vendors to provide, like time management and supervision and professional communication skills. And so we are in the process of developing a series of uh, professional development trainings that we will offer for our CBO partners, either funding exclusively through adult ed funds. We're still working out the logistics there, or we might ask them to make some kind of a nominal or in-kind contribution to those efforts. And we're hoping that and anticipating we hear from them that this will be a great way to build that sense of people saying, "Oh wow, City College is a great partner. They're really helping us out," uh, and also to actually help with developing the competency of our CBO staff, which we anticipate will increase their ability to refer folks to us. Um, one one of those things that we have launched already is a class called CCSF 101, which is a workshop that we are now offering twice a semester. We are rotating it around our different locations in the city, and we've had anywhere between 15 and 45 CBO staff folks come to the organization, come to the training to learn about how to help their clients navigate the matriculation and registration process at the college, and to know about all the different services that we have there. And that's been very well received. We feed them, we give them some tchotchkes, but we also really take them through their paces of, so what would you do if you had the student with issue A? How are you going to, where would you send them into college? And then we troubleshoot it all together. And it allows people to build relationships with the people at the college that they're going to need to know to make those referrals effectively, and also to build relationships with one another so that we can operate as a more cohesive system within the city. When we put the word out to our CBO partners and said, hey, we have this professional development idea, what are you most interested in? One of the things that rose to the very tip top immediately was a need for more training on working with folks who are experiencing mental health issues. We initially reached out to our own community mental health worker training program to see if we could put something together in-house. They, not surprisingly, are very, very busy and were not able to help us out with that. And then it turned out that there is a organization, a nationwide organization that offers a free class called Mental Health First Aid. And they are operating in the Bay Area with a grant so they can provide the training for free. So we are offering our first iteration of that training in early December. We have 30 slots, and I have 40 CBO staff, and then another 10 folks from City College who want to take the training. So I think we're going to have to schedule another one right away. I actually went to the training myself, and I heartily recommend it. So I encourage you to check out the mental health first aid folks and see if they're operating in your community. It's just a terrific resource to learn about what are some of the really common mental health issues people might be experiencing, and how can you intervene, and when is it appropriate for you to intervene and try to de-escalate a situation if there's a crisis in progress. And then last but not least, I'm frantically hitting refresh on my email to find out about when a new position is going to be posted at the college. We got it approved through budget. It's just a question of getting it up on our website for someone to work in our outreach office and be focused exclusively on doing outreach for our non-credit programs and for working with our CBOs. We have an outreach office. They have 2 full-time staff and a few other student workers, 3 full-time staff and some student workers, but they've been focused on more traditional aged college students, and this person is going to be more of an expert on our ESL and high school completion and CTE programs, and they'll have a route of different nonprofits to go around to drop off materials, answer questions, um, and again be sort of the human face of here's City College, and we're eager to partner with you and help you and your clients to be successful. So that is all that I have to say. Do folks have questions they'd like to ask? That's actually not all I have to say. That's all I had pre-prepared to say. I have lots and lots of other things to say. So please go ahead and ask some questions. While waiting for folks to ask questions, I can address one of the things that came up earlier in the chat around data sharing. I know that data is always a hairy topic. I know that some of the other consortia have invested in a software called Community Pro to help with data sharing between their adult schools and community colleges and community-based organizations. We elected not to do that because we already have 3 or 4 data systems internally that have trouble talking to each other and didn't want to add another one. So the way we've handled that is, again, at the outset of any partnership, clearly identifying what are the data that need to be shared. Do we need to get into nitty gritty about grades and job placements, or can we make a more kind of bright line that we'll handle the training piece and you'll handle the case management piece? And we're not going to tell you students' grades, and you're not going to tell us if the student's having a personal crisis, but we're just going to kind of stay in our lanes in terms of how we're working together. That is easiest logistically, but maybe not going to provide the best service to, because we're not getting that integrated service to the clients. So in other situations, I know that we have gone to the step of having all the students sign a waiver so that their organization, their information could be shared between the college and a community partner so that we can collaborate more on cases. Any other questions? Veronica, would it be too much trouble to flash back on the responses to the second question that was in the chat pod at the very beginning and see if there's anything else we can address?
No, it would not be. However, you do have a question from CJ Bishop with Coast Community College District.
Oh, great.
You want to address that question, and then
I'm not seeing that.
I'll transfer it back.
Did that maybe just go to you?
No, it's in the general chat pod. He says, based on your experiences, what was the most challenging component you saw integrating your partnerships? What do you think is needed for the future to ensure program growth/community needs?
I think the most challenging thing is really establishing trust, frankly. I think, particularly in our situation, there had been some bad blood. I'm just going to be really frank, between the college and between some of our larger nonprofits, and they're kind of like they, in some ways, sort of given up on working with us, or would work with us when they had to, but we're kind of like those guys. And so we really made a big charm offensive to say, hey, look, we know it's been hard in the past. How can we make this better? Because we're really focused on attaining the goals of adult education funding, which is to improve and expand adult education, and also in being good members of our community. And just getting to that place where we can each accept that we might do things differently and have different structures and come from different backgrounds and be regulated in different ways, but that we all all have our hearts in the right place, and we all want to help these individuals, whether you call them clients or we call them students or whatever it might be. Um, I think that made a big difference. Um, and then, once you have that trust, you make a lot of changes. And I know we all like to think that there's some kind of magic system that we can put in place, but fundamentally, some of it comes down to personal relationships and building those personal relationships so that people say, oh, okay, I know that these folks, we're all on the same page. We want to help our city. So, Veronica,
Okay.
this is
Okay, thank you, Lucy. There's another question from CJ Bishop. Do you have ongoing reports slash findings that assess how goals slash objectives have been met? How is that process in defining measurements?
we do not have, we have put some of our outcomes in our reports to the adult ed program. Sort of we did this project with this organization and here were the outcomes. And I'm sorry, could you repeat the second part of the question?
Okay, how is that process in defining measurements?
So I think the defining measurements piece really needs to happen up front. And so one of the things that I think it is in that our brochure, the community brace brochure, or maybe, you know what, it's in a different document, is we came up with, and I would be happy to share this with everyone, a list of all the different kind of details that need to be worked out before you enter into a collaboration. Um, who's responsible for case management? Where is that going to happen? What's the expected job placement if that is the outcome? What are expected attendance rates if what you're working on is a training program? Just kind of making sure that we're talking about all of those topics before we get to the place of creating a contract, or an agreement to work together, so that aren't any surprises later on.
Okay, and then there is another question. With 9 campuses, how do you sort out which students from which campuses can participate in the partnership programs? Do individual campuses work with specific partners, or is it more open than that?
Um, yes and no. um, it uh, it depends. I mean, I think certainly we call them centers, not campuses for complicated reasons. Our centers are based in the neighborhoods where they're located, and so they tend to have relationships, pre-existing relationships with the CBOs in their neighborhoods. So one example of that is our Chinatown campus center is well established, and there's a very long, well established and what's the word I'm like, long living is not the right word, um, organization called Self Help for the Elderly that has trained folks to be home care providers and also to work in, they have a program, a custodial program and a culinary program that they've partnered with the college on. So we certainly have worked closely with them, across the street. I'd say the same thing in our mission center. That we have a wide number of CBOs in mission, and so the mission center is the natural partner for them. But if the college is doing the recruitment, we always emphasize in any conversation that we are an open access institution. We accept 100%, the top 100% of our applicants, and so we cannot pick and choose about who we're going to accept into our program. So even if the program is, a program that's being sponsored by an organization in the Chinese community. If somebody comes applies who's from a different community, we still have to accept them, and that's another thing that we conversation that we need to have early on and make sure everyone's clear on that. So we will end up sometimes in a situation where there's a collaborative training program, um, but not everyone in the training program is getting all the same services as the rest of the group because they don't meet whatever funding qualifications that the CBO's funder requires, and you just have to explain that we can't rule somebody out because they don't meet whatever income requirements the CBO might have.
Okay, and then another question, slide number 5. In which departments are students taking non-credit classes? Are those classes part of a career pathway?
Um, so, again, I think the spacing here got a little messed up. There is no licensed vocational fashion certificate that I'm aware. Um, that would be cool. So, all of the programs down here are career and technical education. That's not true. Older adults is not, and disabled students programs and services. But we have almost all of the rest are career and technical certificates that have a non-credit side that people can complete the non-credit certificate, and then if they want, come back and take credit to move up. So it's a stackable system. Does that answer that question?
I'll wait to see. It was from Mercedes. I'll wait to see if she responds. And I think this is more of a comment from Emma. It is not a bad idea to fund collaboration CBO projects, especially in community campuses and online community colleges.
Yeah, and I'm not saying at all that would have been a bad idea. We just decided that it wasn't right for us. That maybe at some point we'll change our minds. But right now, given where the college is and all the different things going on in the city, it didn't seem like the right move for us. It seemed like it was going to be very heavy administration wise to do it in a fair and transparent way, and maybe not the most effective way for us to get the services and the dollars out to the community.
Okay, and we have another question from Anthony. He asks, regarding promotion slash advertising efforts, how do you let students know about the partners you are working with? And what are CBOs doing to promote?
That's a great question. We have not advertised the fact that we're working closely with CBOs. We've sort of relied on our CBO partners to spread the word about our services. We do every time we come up with a new. So we're in our second round of our adult education marketing campaign, and we produce posters and postcards, and when we get those, we take them out to all our CBOs, and I guess I assume that in their handing those out, they're saying, hey, in addition to our services, there's these services at City College, and we work very closely with them. And what we're hoping is that they're through CCSF 101 and through these other collaborative efforts that the message that they're sending to uh, clients and potential students is like, yeah, City College is great, and here's exactly how you would go and get started with them. Whereas the message in the past might have been like, oh, stay with us because they're too hard to navigate.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. I am not seeing any additional questions at this time, but we do have about 4 more minutes until closing, so if anyone else has any additional questions, we have a little bit more time. And we do have a couple of people who are typing, Lucy.
It's so funny. I can see that they're typing, but I can't see what they're.
And we just have two comments, one from Barbara saying thank you, and then Diana says, thank you for emphasizing about establishing trust and strategies to get started. Focus on the learners. It's so important.
That we're all about students first, and one of the great things about our fair city is that people tend to be probably like most other areas, but this is the place I've lived longest in my life, and so people are pretty passionate about, you know, I'm a San Franciscan, and that means taking care of the other San Franciscans here, and so we can always find common ground there, if even if we can't find it on the money. Well, thanks everyone for participating. It was great to get to chat with you, and feel free to reach out if you have any other questions.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you everyone for participating in this afternoon's webinar. As most of you may know, we do have another webinar beginning at 1:30 p.m. It's the beginning of the year webinar with Neil Kelly of the AEP office and Jay Wright of CASAS, and they'll be taking a deeper dive on using your data effectively. In addition, next week we have two student data reporting webinars on Monday and Tuesday. On Monday, October 29th, we will have Kathleen Porter and her team out of Poway. They will be discussing their best practices for engaging their members in effective data reporting and then how they use their data in their consortium. So you definitely want to register for that. In addition, Jay will also be back on Tuesday looking at CASAS data and how consortium managers can use different areas of the reports for their reporting and using data effectively. I will post the registration link for those webinars in the chat pod. And we'll close the webinar at this time, and when I do, the evaluation will appear. Please be sure to fill out the evaluation. It'll only take about 1 or 2 minutes, and let Lucy know what you thought of today's webinar. We would like to do kind of a cross comparison of what you were hoping to gain from the webinar and what the outcomes actually were. So we want to make sure that we are serving you effectively. Thank you all very much for your time and your participation, and I hope everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you. And thank you, Diana, for posting that link.